8th session of the day. And my name is Nick Salmon. I'm one of the 3 founders of PBL Plus, along with Gabriel Diago in Colombia and Frank Locker, who you've just seen in New Hampshire. And about 4 years ago, we had this crazy idea of doing this work together. And about 5 months ago, we had the idea of spending 24 hours together. This was pre-COVID. So we were thinking, how are we possibly going to coax people out of their schools to be a part of this? And of course, you're all a captive community at this point. So we're delighted to have you with us. And this is a project, a series of projects that are really important to me because I first learned about some watershed projects in Livingston, Montana, that Dave has been an overseer of for a long time, where students have been stewards of a highly impaired stream that flows from Livingston into the Yellowstone River. The Yellowstone River begins in Yellowstone National Park. I've known Wendy a long time. I've known Jaime now for several years, Gisselle. And when I was working down in Los Caobos, I want to say maybe even a year ago, and then again in September, we started to talk about what if students in Los Caobos were also stewards of an impaired river. And so when I was down there in February, we had a conversation, and we had a conversation with Mark Cameron, and Mark and I have known each other for 40 years. And he works for the City of Baltimore Department of Public Works, and he does urban water restoration projects too. So we had this really interesting collection. Somehow I know like a dozen people who work in the world of stream restoration in one way or another. And so my thought is a little bit different from the way we did this in February. We are going to have the students share first, and then we'll have Wendy and Mark share feedback. And I guess Dave is a stand-in for a whole bunch of students, probably hundreds of students at this point that have been a part of a project there. So why don't we start with the students in Los Caobos, and you can share. And I know you gave me a video, but we've had a really hard time trying to play video, especially now that we have 51 people on the call. So if you can share where your project came from and where it's going, what you've done so far, you tell us that story. Then we'll hear from Dave, and then we'll hear from Mark and Wendy. Okay?
Okay. So Gisselle, would you like to start, or should we let the kids to speak their minds?
I don't know. Maybe if they want to start, and then we back up them if they need to.
Okay, I'm gonna say something really quick in order to introduce the conversation. Give me, Nick, is it impossible to share screen right now?
Yes, you can share a screen.
Gisselle, do you have the information related to the presentation? Okay, just give us a sec so the students can organize their ideas in order to present this topic.
Just a sec.
Okay. So, so I'm Jaime Otavo. I teach social studies in Gimnasio Los Caobos in Bogota. I'm a sociologist and a philosopher, and when we first created this project with the 6th graders, we wanted to apply the basic functions for a PBL project. That is to say, for example, to do, to think, and to change, right? So following these steps, the kids approach the river in order to understand a specific problem and to propose doable solutions. And that's pretty much the approach that we use to understand something in order to change or to propose doable solutions. And in this particular case, the students approach Rio Frio in Bogota. Okay, so the Rio Frio is located in Chía, and Gimnasio Los Caobos is located also in Chía, and Chía is a town near Bogota. Nick already know it. And the river has suffered contamination or pollution in recent years, and this obviously affects the community in various ways, multiple ways. And the purpose of this project is precisely for students to get to know the surroundings of the river and its effects in an interdisciplinary way. For example, social studies and biology, okay? So Gisselle, can you move backwards?
Here or
yeah, right there.
forward? Okay.
Yeah, the title is Environmental Awareness, and the driving question that the kids use, and they will be commenting on this question in a few minutes, is how can we contribute to the recovery of the water sources around Gimnasio Los Caobos? And that water source is nothing but Rio Frio, okay?
Okay, I want to add something very quick besides of what Jaime just said, and is that in the image you can see some of the points in which we were able to collect some samples and some data that we further analyzed in order to understand which were the problematic of the river and which were the solutions we were able to provide later on as a community, starting from Gimnasio Los Caobos, which is like our school, but also giving another insights for solving problems that many of the people could have around the river, okay? So for you to understand what the students did before they talk, I just want to talk 2 little minutes, is that we approach the project like in 2 different ways. The first one was to, all of the students, the whole class, carried out some activities, the whole group, in which they were trying to get to these solutions. For example, they created some water filters. They're gonna explain to you this later. They made a first phase of the physical and chemical analysis of the water. They also came to a natural reserve in order to observe how is a water source, how clean it is, how are the characteristics of the water, and then contrast it with the water they obtained from the town itself, that it was already polluted and all that stuff. They already launched a campaign in order for the people to help us to plant trees in the water source to help this environment. They also did different kinds of analysis regarding the sociological and the philosophical solutions. They did this with Jaime. Here we involve different disciplines, for example, STEAM, social studies, math, Spanish, science, of course. And then with these like broad activities, we carried out other specialty-based activities that the students carried out based on their interest. So they have to apply using a CV and doing interviews with us in order for them to be suitable for a specific task and convert into a specialist regarding a specific aspect of the river. So after that, they did different activities. For example, they carried out an analysis of the ecological footprint for different people at the school and the community. They did some interviews. They organized the activity of the tree planting, and they get further into the analysis of the water or the parameters of the river. So that's about it, and the students will get further in each activity.
What if we begin with the science part in order to follow the arguments? Gisselle, can you show the campaign the kids developed, the picture? Do you have it right there?
Yeah, of course. Santi, if you want to start, Trivi.
Okay. Hello, my name is Santiago Triviño.
Hello, my name is Asia.
Are we going to talk about the water analysis of Rio Frio?
Okay, so let's start. Rio Frio problems are that some industries contaminate the river, like Chapelli and Holcim. Chapelli is a dairy factory that throws chemicals, and they had found milk on the river. Holcim is a cement or concrete factory that throw the trash that is left from the bricks to the river. And that's why the pH goes so low. So basically the pH is the measure of water of acid or basic. Acid means that the water has too many much hydrogen ions, and basic means that there are too many minerals and hydroxide ions on the river. In the part that is more contaminated is Chapelli, because Chapelli is the more the industry that more contaminates the river. And also you can find some parts of the river that are clean. Like we go to a field trip that we go to the one of the last forms of clean water. We planted some trees, and that helps to the hardness of the water. Hardness means that the soil then goes down to the river, and the river gets less water. So that is why the trees help.
We take 2 samples of the car organization, one in the beginning of the river, and other one in a bridge. And the sample 3 is we took of the chapelli and have a lot of elements that has not to be there. In the sample 4, there's not sulfate, and a lot of the elements disappear. And the elements that are in the river is chloride, sodium, bicarbonate, total alkalinity, and just a little bit of residual alkalinity. We do a lot of experiments to know how is the water, like high level of sodium that is bad to human health. We can see that the pH, when the water goes downstream, the pH goes lower. There are boron, ammonium, chromium, iron, aluminum from fertilizers, a high level of chlorides from the residual water, and total alkalinity is helping the pH. There's deforestation and contamination in around the river, and we need a specialized equipment to know more specific information. Some of the solutions that we have are the microphyte plants that are aquatic vegetations that help to clean the river, the redox process that help the water chemistry. The third one is using the UV light that degrades the chemicals, and the infrared light accelerate the process. The first solution is using a wastewater treatment plant. There's one in Bogota, but we can make a small one near to Rio Frio. And plant trees. We go to one of the last of the cleanest rivers and plant trees to help you.
Okay, now the other solutions are like more social solutions. The first one is making campaigns. We can talk to people, and so they know what's happening in the river, so they can make requests to the mayor office. So the sewage respect the river and don't throw all the fecal matter to the water. We can make a garbage collection day, like we can make posters, meetings, and talk to people and say that it would be a garbage collection day, so they can volunteer and go to help us to recollect trash. We can reduce the amount of chemicals thrown to the river by teach all the people from individuals to a whole community what chemicals do to the river and why are they dangerous for living things, and promote education and self-awareness that is basically the same as the last one. And number 8, the most easy of the solutions that all people in here, we can do that. We can reduce our carbon footprint. We can do it by turning off the light, don't let the water flow when we don't need it. We can use the car less times a week. Eat more natural food that is not so processed, so it don't hurt the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thanks, Sebastian. Thanks, Santiago. So as you can notice, there are multiple ways to approach the river's pollution other than science. But as you can notice as well, they use science in order to get to know the problem of the river. The other step that we use following basic PBL steps to do a project is to think or to understand a specific problem of the river. So in this particular case, we're going to study, or the kids will talk about how is it possible to approach, right, a water source through the lens of basics, let's put it this way, sociology and philosophy. So Natalia, Santiago, this is on you guys. Santiago on.
I think
Natalia.
Santiago is muted. I don't know why.
Santiago.
Santi, can you?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Santiago Lucas. And friends to the human
Hi, my name is Natalia Jumba.
and presented the human mind. The human being is a fragile balance between the reptilian brain and the neocortex. The neocortex is the intelligent part of the human that makes I think about the future, but the reptilian brain is the opposite, makes the human not think before acting, which makes me not think about the future. Not.
And I'm gonna present how societies collapse. And most downfalls occur quickly. A lot of them shortly after society has reached its peak in pollution, prosperity, and military power. When a society collapses, it usually looks more like an iceberg than is melting from within. Everything may look well from the outside until the society reaches a breaking point and the whole thing self-destroys. The connection between how societies collapse and how human mind operates is that the reptilian brain is causing our own collapse. And love to the brain could be the solution that is developed for the future population. If we take care of our planet in this moment, the people in the future could use it. And this also can happen with the Rio Frio. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, and I didn't catch a few ideas well, Natalia, perhaps of your surroundings, but obviously the point of approaching this type of problem, which is the pollution of Rio Frio through the lens of philosophy and sociology, for example, is, for example, to realize, and the kids did it pretty well, that pollution is a human problem, and as such, it must be humanly solved. Obviously, to solve anything, for example, the river, it has to be known firstly, and that's why they use science, philosophy, and sociology, let's put it away, to get to know the problem. When they realized what the problem was, it became a common problem, and as a common problem, therefore, a solution was collectively created, and that was one of the kids' mission. So in order to spread the idea or to communicate how was it possible for them to make people aware of the problem, they create a campaign and different other steps. So in this particular case, I would like that Maria Belén and Cristina, right, summarizes really quick, it's up to you, what you did according to this.
I think Maria Belén is silenced. Can you please, Nick, help me out to unmute Maria Belén, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Cristina.
My name is Maria Belén.
And I'm going to tell you what we do in science. In science, my group of interviews by all the school, and we calculate the carbon footprint of persons and students. And we calculate the CO2 that persons produce by year and they generate. Then we ask them some questions and tell them how they affect the world and contaminate it, and how can they help them, like with actions, 2 simple actions that they can do in their normal days, like don't use the car too much or turn off the lights and eat things that are not so processed.
Okay. We also went to a natural reserve called Carmen de los Juncales, where we had the experience to plant a tree. Each of the students plant a tree And this was a nice and very funny experience with our friends and teachers. And the purpose of this action was to think more about the future.
Anything else, guys?
I want to hear from Dave and talk about what's happening in Livingston, Montana, and then I'm sure we'll have more questions for the kids, especially after Mark and Wendy.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Maria Belén. Thank you all, guys.
So Dave, tell us about the Fleshman Creek project. I think it's been going on like 30 years or something like that.
It has been going on for like 26 years that I've been at the school here. Mm-hmm. And are you still with me? Hello?
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you, can't see you. That's fine.
Okay, how do I get this so you can see me?
You did something. I can ask you to start your video again.
All right.
Or you can keep talking. What happened? Do we still have you, Dave? We don't. Perhaps he'll be back in a moment. Wendy, since you're there in Livingston and you're someone devoted to rivers and to restoring impaired rivers, tell us a little bit about what's happening there, and Dave will be with us in a moment.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Wendy Weaver, and I run a small nonprofit called Montana Aquatic Resource Services. And one of the programs that we're trying to do is to protect the Yellowstone River so that when the river floods and when it moves, it's able to move across its floodplain in perpetuity. So there are a lot of impacts to the river from development, people building houses or buildings that are in the floodplain or very close to it. There's a lot of highways and railroads that have riprap that when that's placed in the river, it kind of controls it and it doesn't allow the river to move. And so it's really, really important for floodplain connectivity and riparian corridors. And for the wildlife, we have a lot of elk, deer, and bears that move out of the Yellowstone National Park and along those river corridors, and also a really vibrant trout fishery that need those that riparian corridor to thrive. And so as this area starts to grow and there's more people using it and more threats to it, it's becoming more and more important to protect that area. So we try to work with landowners to essentially put channel migration easements on their property, which essentially says, I agree to not control the river. I won't channelize it. I won't riprap it, which is placing rock on it. And I won't control the river. I'm just going to let her do what she needs to do naturally. So that's the main program that we're working on in the Yellowstone.
Great. So now we have Dave again. So why don't you tell us about the Fleshman Creek, because again, that's a version of what the students in Los Cabos have been doing and is related to Wendy's work, but you've had students working on this for a long time.
Absolutely. I'm in a great position, and I have the Yellowstone River 200 yards outside my door and Fleshman Creek about 50 yards outside my door on the other side of my school. I started off, the kids would go down and we'd examine the bugs in the Yellowstone River and compare it to the macroinvertebrates in the Fleshman Creek area, and they were similar. And then this goes with the city and parks guy or the city guy who's in somewhere out east. But I worked with the city, and what happened was all of our city streets and alleys and what have you, all dumped into the sewer system, water sewer, which ran to the Fleshman Creek. And apparently somebody had dumped a meth lab into that. And so I could teach the kids about point source pollution. And we had an exact point where that water ran into Fleshman Creek. And from that point down, not one macro or not one fish was living. So they shut the river down for a couple weeks so they could come in and test to make sure it was safe for kids to go out there, what killed the bugs and what have you. So that started us just getting out there doing, looking at the bugs in the water because they're cheap to look at and it gives us an idea of what the water quality is compared to the bugs in the Yellowstone River. And then we noticed that like the culverts and what have you would plug up because they were like 2 to 3 foot diameter runoff holes. And when they'd have to get backhoes in there during the runoff to clean them out. So we started designing and mapping the Yellowstone River. And we got with the city and did a GPS where every so often we had a GPS point so we could look at these different points and see what was happening along the river. So we'd monitor the biological, physical, and chemical things that were happening with that water and kept records of it. And as we did that, we'd also report to the city of Livingston what we were discovering, which was great because then working with the people from Public Works, they had a plan to redo all of the city sewers, plumbing, what have you. And they just finished that like 2 years ago. And when they did that, they put in these storm receptacles that when the water, when there's a water event here in Livingston, the water runs into this sewer system, and then it goes to this big, it's like a big centrifugal force thing. It spins off all the stuff, and they haul out the dirt and everything that would have gone to the river. So just the water's going there. And my kids and I used to go to get the community to be aware. We would paint on the sidewalks, dump no waste, drains the stream. And we have like a little fish there. So later on, when they redid the project though, which was great, they put these metal things on each storm drain that says dump no waste, drain to the water. And then I'm gonna back up now to when we first started doing this. So the kids were monitoring the stream and what have you. And then we noticed that the banks were eroding and what have you. And this kind of goes along with what they're doing in South America. We actually took willow cuttings and put them in my greenhouse and got them to root. And then we took them down and actually walked along the stream as they were digging and making the stream meander and stuck these spikes into the ground. And now when you go down there, it's nothing but a jungle of willow trees along the water. Fish have come up in there. People go down there fishing now. We've turned a desolate area with nothing happening, very shallow water into a deep water fishing kind of haven for tourists and for just our local people, and just the fish themselves have a great habitat. And now that's draining cleanly into the Yellowstone River. So it was us and the kids working with, talking about what we're doing, publicizing what we're doing and what have you. And then to go with the lady who was talking about the Yellowstone River, right out here, I'm like 85 miles from Yellowstone National Park. So every fall we go out and check the stoneflies, mayflies, and caddisflies, do numbers. We do it like 3 different ways. We use kick nets. We actually go out and pick stones. We do different things so we can get numbers. Then we go up in the park and do the same thing. And what we've discovered is up in Yellowstone Park, we have more salmon stoneflies than we do the golden stoneflies. And down here at Livingston, we have less salmon flies, but we have tons of golden salmon flies, so stoneflies. So anyway, we are kind of doing those kinds of project-based learning in that. And with that, the kids have to do writings and turn in papers. And then at the end, put them into teams. And I'm sorry you can't see, but I have like 12 of their documents that they have that are at least 10 pages of things that they did, the physical, chemical, and biological effects of our impact on Fleshman Creek and the Yellowstone River. Now I'm going to shift gears one more time. I want to talk about the bugs. After 2006 or 2002, whenever the event happened, we kept monitoring the stream every year. And me, being a non-native of Montana, decided I'd just take a couple buckets full of water from the Yellowstone River and put it in Fleshman Creek. And lo and behold, Fish and Wildlife, thank God, caught me and said, David, you can't do bucket biology. we've got to let it come back natural. So just in the last 2 years, last year and this year, we finally started noticing once in a while, we'll get a stonefly in here. But at first, no indicator species, no stoneflies, no mayflies, no caddisflies, which tells you that the water is clean in that. We'd all find all kinds of other things, leeches and things that could, bloodworms and what have you, could work in low oxygen levels. But once we restored the creek, we want to see how fast it would come back. And it took it about 2 years. Now it's getting back to where the water quality, even up where we are, we're like 2 miles from the outlet to the Yellowstone River. So we can see that it's moving up this way and the life is coming back to the water. And the fish are moving up in here, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So Dave,
Okay, sorry.
before we hear from Mark, and then we'll have more items. My takeaway of the work on Fleshman Creek is that the students worked in many different ways. So they're gathering information, they're part of physical restoration, planting willows. I know they've been a part of weed removal and raising sheep along the edge of the river and things like that along the creek. And they've been at it a long time.
Correct.
And the other thing that I recall from Livingston is that the very young students have one contact with the river, and then when they hit about year 7, they have another contact, and they're even paying jobs for the high schoolers to be a part of it. So it's not a kind of a one-time project that disappeared. It's an ongoing effort that almost every student probably who's ever gone to the Livingston Public Schools has had some contact with that project over the years. Or
that's correct. In the elementary school, they do a thing called leaf pack, where they'll pack leaves into net bags and stick them out in the river and see what attacks there, what comes in, what bugs they get after a couple weeks. And they're called watershed warriors. They meet after school. So it's kind of a voluntary thing from 3rd grade through 5th grade. And then from 6th grade to 8th grade, we do rock pack instead of leaf pack, where we take onion bags and put different various rocks, some smooth, some what have you, and see what bugs move into them. So how does this migration work and where is that going? So then we'll pull out the indicator species, all the bugs, we'll classify them down, look at them. What does this mean? What is this telling us? Get a pollution tolerance index for the water. So I'm excited to hear what they're doing down there they're almost starting like where we started. Actually over on my wall, too bad I can't show you, I have some newspaper articles that the kids wrote, and a couple of them, they're kind of like in their 20s now. They're actually working for newspapers. So there's many, many things where they can take off from this, and they'll come back and say, Mr. Petit, that inspired me. When I was writing this stuff, I really had to have facts and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of like pretty cool to see these different spin-offs of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Again, I want to leave time for us to come back to everybody. So I'm thinking, Mark, if you're okay just talking about what's happening in Baltimore without showing all the images, I think it'll be a little easier transition here.
Sure, although they're great images, and you should share them at some point because I have a bunch of links. Thank you for having me. As Dave mentioned, I am the city guy from out east. I'm an architect, landscape architect and planner. I do not work directly with students or in education, but a role that I play in the Department of Public Works in Baltimore City is to be a connector. I head up a section called Watershed Planning and Partnership. So we do 2 things. We do watershed-based planning. We also work on developing partnerships, and that's across city agencies, with nonprofits, and with schools and community-based groups. Baltimore, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn off my video and then go through my slides, because then I'll remember what I was going to talk about. Is that okay, Nick?
Yeah, that's fine.
I won't share this. I won't share the screen though.
Oh, I see. Just so that you can see.
Yeah, that way it'll go quicker. First of all, hello to all the students who work in Columbia. It's really nice to see all your faces. Having met you in February. One thing I want to two things, I guess. One is the work that you're doing and the idea that it's all connected is definitely needed because we tend to kind of silo what we do. And I know working in city government, we often, too often do that. The second is, I thought it was interesting, Sebastian, the last point you made when you're talking about kind of the social component, and you said maybe the easiest thing was for people to do, like turn off their lights, eat better food, etc. I think what we find is that's actually the hardest thing. It's really the hardest thing is to change behavior. And one of the things that my focus is on is that, and I think this is personally as well, that for me, water quality is really community quality. That in order for people to change behaviors, if it's relevant to them, then they're more likely to change. And we see that in Baltimore. Baltimore is, we're on a harbor, we're adjacent to the Chesapeake Bay. There are we have several urban streams, but there are a lot of people and students who really don't have interaction with those water bodies, and they don't really care about them, but they care about what happens at their school, on their street, and in their home. And if those kind of changes can be made and they have a benefit for improving our local streams and waterways, then that is a good thing. So let me just quickly, so if you're not familiar, Baltimore, Maryland, we are a population of about 600,000. We are 81 square mile area. We have 5 watersheds for urban streams that run through the city. And those watersheds cross political boundaries. And that's one of the things when you work for a local jurisdiction is you also have to work with other political government entities, because all of the watersheds in Baltimore City actually they begin upstream in surrounding counties. So that is one of the things that we have to work on as well. Baltimore City, and I had talked to the students about this, we have 3 different water systems, drinking water, and so that comes from north and upstream from the city in large reservoirs. Those tend to be in highly wooded and protected areas. We also have our wastewater system, our sewage, and then also stormwater, and that's the area that I work in, because the city is mandated through the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, Clean Water Act, to improve our impaired waterways, because all of our stormwater goes directly into streams or into the harbor and then ultimately into the Chesapeake Bay. So some of the pollutants that we have to deal with include nitrogen and phosphorus, sediment, bacteria, and trash. And those are caused by a host of issues. Almost 50% of the city is hard surfaces, roads, buildings, parking lots, etc. We have a very old infrastructure. Our pipe system, they're still digging up clay pipes that are over 100 years old. That leads to them failing and cracking. We have issues with animal waste in the city with pets, and then further upstream with farms and livestock. Lawn fertilizer, again, there's probably less lawn fertilizer used in Baltimore City, but that's upstream issue. Our streams are highly degraded, and urban streams are highly eroded, which cause a lot of sedimentation. We also have industry that's along the harbor. And then, as I mentioned, human behavior, littering, trash dumping, not picking up animal waste. Those are all contributing factors. So what are we doing in Baltimore? So Baltimore, and why I think it's important to talk about partnership, because it really takes government, nonprofits like Wendy heads up. It takes residents and it takes students working together to improve these conditions. So at the Department of Public Works, we do water monitoring and investigation. So what the students were doing along the Rio Frio or along the Yellowstone and its tributaries, you know, we do on a daily, weekly basis. We're checking and we're doing sampling of the water, but we're also doing investigations to try to find when we do see problems around like sewage leakage or illegal discharges from private residences or businesses. We're doing a lot of tree planting. Baltimore City is the only large urban city in the United States that saw an increase in its tree canopy over the last 10 years. And that's done through a combination of the forestry department, nonprofits, and community and school groups. We're replacing a lot of hard surfaces with grass and gardens. So the Department of Public Works will be has removed about 7 acres of impervious, like asphalt and concrete at schools and replaced it with grass and trees. We're also going to be installing about 12 rain gardens at schools in the coming year. We are fixing our utility pipes. We're sweeping and cleaning streets and helping with community cleanups. And then we also have things like Mr. Trash Wheel and our harbor skimmers, which are collecting trash from the water. One of the things I wanted to highlight, and although I'm not directly involved with these groups, but do work with them in a peripheral manner, is that the state of Maryland was the first state in the US to include or require environmental literacy in its curricula standards. And to support that, there are associations like the Maryland Association of Environment and Outdoor Education that runs a green school program. So a green school program, teachers and students apply, they register their schools if they're doing projects like tree planting or gardens or programs like recycling or environmental testing and science programs. Also, Baltimore's Office of Sustainability has grant programs to support students who are doing this work, as well as support school green ambassadors, so helping students to organize at school to lead these efforts. And then there are some great nonprofits like the National Aquarium, the Masonville Cove Environmental Education Center, and the Waterfront Partnership that support schools in providing a host of environmental education programs. A lot of times these are very hands-on, like building oyster cages, to water testing, to shore restoration programs. So there's a lot of work going on in Baltimore, and we like to say everyone can make a difference, and I think that is what I'm hearing with everyone else on this webinar, is that it takes, it really takes a whole community, and someone in working in city government, we realize that it's not just us, but we have to figure out ways that we can sometimes get out of the way and sometimes just support groups who are doing this work. So that's it.
Thank you, Mark. So we don't have too much more time, 7 more minutes or so before we need to make the transition. But what I've heard, and then I'd like Wendy or Mark to provide their own insights to this, is that what we're seeing the students both in Montana and in Colombia doing is the important kind of first bit of work that needs to be done in order to improve the water quality of a river. So you are, all of the young people that are represented here on the screen right now are really kind of taking the first really important steps. You're raising awareness, you're gathering information, you're exploring a lot of different solutions. But the next piece, and it's the reason why I asked Wendy and Mark, and I have other contacts that I've shared with Jaime and Gisselle, is there are women who are river scientists in Montana who can provide some feedback as to your approach. You have somebody with a lot of experience of working with a lot of different groups, trying to take all those small steps and make them add up to something more in an urban area in Baltimore through Mark. So, and of course you have a sister school essentially in Livingston that the students are almost the exact same age as you, and again they've had a long history of working with their community on that work. So that's my quick summary. But Wendy, if you have some thoughts about what the students ought to be thinking about next, I think that would be important to share. And I think you need me to unmute you. So there you go.
Yeah, it's what a great day, and just to hear all the work that's being done and what the students are doing is so inspiring. I can't tell you how much this feels good to hear this on Earth Day. I guess, you know, a lot of the work that we do is like bigger, holistic protection of wetlands, streams, and rivers. And so what's so important is getting literally into the weeds, into the detail on the ground of protecting at a micro scale the streams and rivers, and looking at those qualities that Dave talked about as well. But I guess the one thing that I realize is probably as, if not more important than the science on the ground in the rivers, is the social science behind the work that we do, and building partnerships and building relationships across the spectrum between students, with nonprofits, with agencies, with businesses and corporations to support that work, because that is really where the groundswell, I think, will come from, you know, making headway and scaling up all of the projects and the work that's being done on the ground to a bigger level. So I guess I just want to emphasize how important it is to just build relationships with people that will eventually understand and support that work. So.
Good. And I don't know that we still have Dave on. It looked like he was maybe trying to drive out and get to the river so he could show you what the river looks like. But I hope that all of you students in Los Caobos and Jaime and Gisselle will keep in contact with Mark and Wendy and Will and all the other people that I've linked you up with, because as that project matures over time, and whether it's what Wendy just referred to, it's the combination of science and the social science of connecting with your community. There's a lot of work to do, and you have an important voice in shaping that along the way. And Sebastian wants to say something, and there you are. And I think I'll let you have the last word, and then we'll step away. Okay, so I've unmuted you just a moment. There, okay, go ahead, Sebastian.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
I was thinking about what Mark said about that people only care of what's after school and in the street. And I think that people would care more of the river if the river makes something for them that help them on, I don't know, like be the water of their house. Because they only care on how the cost of the services, public services. And that's why some people wants to save light, water, but they are not caring about the river. And the problem is that Chia is a little town of 125,000 people. And it's a city that it's not too much disorganized, they don't have awareness of the river. it's a city that only thinks in ourselves.
Mhm. And I think I mentioned back in February, Sebastian, that's a very common thing all around the world. We treat our rivers just like all of you have been witnessing in Colombia, as the afterthought. They're the place where we dispose of things or a resource to be exploited. And it takes a lot of rethinking about how can we change the priority to create a river ecosystem that supports everybody and has the right balance between people and water and industry and all those other things. And again, I think that's why what they're doing in Baltimore and in Livingston are very valuable, because they're essentially working on the exact same problems you are, just a different location.
And Nick,
much lower elevation, by the way.
hey, Nick.
Yeah.
So, hey, Sebastian, I completely agree with your comment. And in fact, I had written that down as a comment I wanted to make, is that you know, there are a couple ways to approach it, and you definitely have identified it. Is that one is, you know, how do you get people to care about the Rio Frio? And there might be ways of that. And I know in Baltimore, you get people to care about streams or the harbor by increasing access to it, by improving recreation, like letting them be out on the harbor in canoes and kayaks. So I think that is one. And then I think the second is that, you know, there are ways to improve water quality. If we're looking at watershed, a watershed is a large area. That's going to definitely have a positive impact on the stream itself. So, you know, I think both are needed, because in Baltimore, trash is a huge problem in our waterways. And people are very interested in making sure that their neighborhood is clean. So if having a clean neighborhood reduces the trash in the harbor and our waterways, then that's a positive thing. And, you know, it just depends on how you go about getting to that final goal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. This is the kind of vision that Gabrielle and Frank and I had, is that we would connect a wide range of people with students, and not just for 1 hour to kind of share information, but to be mentors and connectors and motivators to keep doing the important work that you're doing. And Wendy and several of you all referred to Earth Day today. It's not coincidental that we chose Earth Day. And again, we thought everybody would be outside on Earth Day. So thanks again for being with us. We'll have a brief transition. And I think Spencer's already on the call for sharing some amazing things happening in China.